Okay, so we were able to make that happen. And again, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Support Sundays, where we provide resources and information for those of us who are having challenges and hurdles in our fertility journey. My name is Michelle McCoy, and I'm here in sunny South Florida. Today, of all days, is May the 31st. One of the things I wanted to point out today is that we've had a really interesting week. Um, you know, Interesting in the sense that, here we are talking about creating life and helping people to bring life into the world, and there are individuals who are being taken out of this world unjustly. And it really puts things into perspective because life is so precious. And there are so many people going to extremes to bring life into this world. And then there are individuals who will gladly and quickly take someone's life out. And so I just wanted us to, within ourselves, take that time to think about the repercussions of our actions and how there's a domino effect that sometimes once that domino has fallen, there's nothing you can do to bring it back. And so, in everything that we do, we have to be aware that there is some sort of consequence. And I'm praying for peace right now. I'm praying that our communities here in America stabilize. I'm praying that those who are suffering from COVID-19 are able to get out of hospital. And right now, we're coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and looking forward to new adventures. The summer is here, it's very hot. And so, without ado, I really want to take us into the conversation about being an egg donor. The fact that it all starts with an egg, right? And there are many people who don't have eggs. And we have a lovely lady here with us. Let me give you a background on her. Her name is Denise Grant, and she lives here in South Florida, but she's a California girl, and she will tell you. And she's going to share with us her journey as an egg donor, and the do's and don'ts, her hurdles, her challenges, um, and the blessings that she's been able to share with others. So without ado, let me bring in our guest, Miss Denise Grant. And here she is. Denise, good morning. Good
Good
afternoon.
morning.
Afternoon. How are you?
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. How are you? It's good to be here today.
It's great. It's great to be here. It's a beautiful Sunday here in South Florida, and we're having a very interesting conversation about the source of mankind, which is an egg. But I'm really interested. I'm really happy that you're able to join us today just to provide some support and insight to many who have hurdles as it relates to eggs. And just want to be able to break it down in layman's terms. What is, what sort of egg are we talking about here? What are the conditions that um, require somebody to need an egg? Um, the fact that, you tell us a story in our journey. So let me just allow you to introduce yourself. Please tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Well, thank you, and I'm truly honored to be here. I do feel like it's a very noble thing to want to bring a child into the world, and and you know, especially in these times, I think it's just the ultimate just vote of faith and optimism and hope that things will um, be better. I don't think that you can have the desire to bring a child into the world without having just a tremendous sense of hope and optimism that, you know, the world that we are creating and the world that we are shaping for them will somehow be better, and then they'll go forward and carry on that good. So I do have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for, you know, for would-be parents, you know, the moms and the dads. So my journey, so let me preface a little bit by saying I am a little bit older, which is kind of why I wanted to talk about this, because when I was a donor, it wasn't nearly as discussed. You know what I mean? It wasn't as talked about. It certainly wasn't you know, just in common conversation like it is now. So once I went through this journey, once I did it, I was just kind of, you know, I just kind of packed away like that whole thing and moved on. So for me, it's really nice to be able to talk about it. So I'm grateful for that. Um, so I'm originally from California, and I came from a truly wonderful family. My mom and my dad, loving, supportive, my brothers and my sisters, my extended family all around. I was raised just a tremendous amount of just love and optimism and respect. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But I also found or felt at a very young age that maybe being a mom wasn't for me. Like it never just felt like my path. And I had wonderful role models. I had wonderful moms and sisters. I was actively involved in the rearing of my nieces and my nephews and my cousins. So I always got it. It wasn't that I didn't get it. You know, I just never felt like it was mine. But then as you grow and you know, go out into the world and you realize, or I realized how incredibly blessed I was to have a family that I did. And I wanted to somehow honor them and their greatness. I mean, good genes, good people, good hearts all around. And if you're going to send anything out into the universe, I think that's what it should be. So, I can't remember how I was approached, but I was approached to see if I wanted to, you know, become an ovum donor. And like I said at the time, I mean, there wasn't a lot of information on it. There wasn't a lot of facts. So I had to do my research to find out exactly what that was. And once again, at around this time, there weren't a lot of people of color that were doing it. The opportunity wasn't available. I'm sure the cost was prohibitive. So, you know, it wasn't. So they had to kind of actively seek somebody who might be a candidate for the people that they had. But after the initial meeting, there was a tremendous amount of, you know, testing and evaluation and background and all of these things to make sure that you were not just capable physically, but also emotionally and mentally, and that you had this strong base so that going into this, you know, you go into it, you know, one person, but you come out on the other side completely different. So it's a magnificent journey, but it is certainly a journey.
Right. And can you tell us, when did you do this? When did you do this?
Now, and forgive me, because I really hadn't thought about it until I had the discussion with you. So I don't have all of my facts and figures, but it had to be probably around 1990, 1998, maybe. Yeah, like 1997, 1998, somewhere around there. I'm sorry I don't have the specifics. I'm starting now to look.
Fine. That's
And but it's
fine.
so I mean, but we're talking about in the 90s is all I can say.
Right.
So
It was in the 90s.
it was a while
Yeah.
ago.
So in the 90s, you know, it's interesting because obviously I was a young lady at the time, but I I'm curious to know if the conversation about egg donating was something that was normal, or or was it a case where it was shrouded in secrecy as it is now? Um, Obviously now we're talking about it because of this assistance of celebrities who are making it the norm in conversations. But for a great deal, a lot of that conversation used to be held in silence or behind
Absolutely.
closed doors and in privacy. So how did you even find out about this as an opportunity? What made you even think about, hey, I want to donate my eggs? What made you think that?
I I met someone that was very actively involved in the community. So it was I have a background in journalism, and I was interviewing someone, and it wasn't what we were talking about at all. It was sort of an offline conversation. You know how you talk and you get to know people when you interview them. Um, and that's when she was sharing her journey as a donor with me. And so I was fascinated. So I wanted to meet the person who was kind of creating this community, and and just find out about it. I really kind of started, just out of curiosity. And then when I saw, what it was and how they were creating these families for people that couldn't have one under other circumstances, or really wanted to experience, the pregnancy, the part of pregnancy was their journey, and that they were, through this means they were able to make that happen. And I just thought it was wonderful. And the people that I met who were doing it, the donors, they were phenomenal people, and recipient families. Now, keep in mind, at this time, it definitely wasn't just common conversation. People weren't sitting around, the table. You didn't see it on the news. You didn't see it. So it was still, so it was something that you had to kind of seek out. And there was a tremendous amount of secrecy, at every step of the way, and privacy and disclosures, and all of this other that, sort of kind of like cloak and dagger. They didn't want to know. Now, it seems now, all of those taboos have been removed, which I think is wonderful, because if you're bringing someone in, and it was kind of an effort of many, acknowledge the many that, that helped get there. I mean, I feel like that's, the energy that you put forth is always matters. So let's let people know so that they feel comfortable about it.
Right. And did you have any support along the way with this decision?
Um, Forgive me. Yeah, there was well, first of all, there was shock. So I had to go to my mom and my dad and tell them that I wanted to do this. Now, they had known, because I had always said, from when I was a child, that, what, I'm not going to have kids. Like, I don't want to be a mom, really. But I love mothers and I love children. So it wasn't any of those issues. I just really felt like it wasn't my journey. So I had to go and explain to my mom and dad what I was going to do. And then, of course, I had to explain. I was like, okay, I'm going to be a donor. And what, you know what I mean? That's definitely not common conversation. So I had to explain it to them, and then explain to them what it was. And I think most importantly, my whys, the reason why I wanted to do it. And a lot of it had to do with honoring them and honoring their legacy and everything that they had brought forth up until this point. And like, you know what, I might not be the one that's going to, but I do feel like everything that you've created needs to move forward and go out into the universe. And so if there's a family that wants to do it, and there is with me specifically, I feel like it's almost my duty and it's my honor to do it.
Great. So let's talk about the process. Well, no, before we talk about the process, let's just have an understanding. What is egg donation?
So the egg here, I pulled up a specific definition so that I would have it for you. But it's a process. Wait, that one, that the egg, okay, that's the wait. Here we go. Egg donation. Of course, my phone turned off, so forgive me for that. But the egg donation process, so what they do is they first of all, they prepare you for a cycle. Now, before you get to this, you have to go through physical evaluations. Like I said, you have to go through medical evaluations. They test your family history, your IQ, your education, just to make sure, and your mental stability and kind of your whys, to make sure that you're doing this from a healthy perspective. Now, and then they have to match you with a family. Your family has to choose you. Sometimes the families interview you. Sometimes you get to meet them, and sometimes you do not. But then actually the IVF cycle, that's a little bit different. And what they do what that looks like is, first of all, it's after you're tested, then they have to stimulate your ovaries. And what has to happen is your cycle needs to line up with the recipient. So you have to take these hormones and you have to take these drugs to align yourself. Now, when I did it, I had to take it was 2 shots a day. It was a big injection and then a kind of a little one, but you had to take it at the exact same time. And somewhere, at the recipient's home, they're doing the exact same thing. And when I say that it's timed, I mean to like 10 minutes. You have to do it, at that exact same time every single day. And like I said, you have maybe a 10-minute margin of error, but it has to be quite succinct. And it's happening with the recipient family as well. So you do that. That's part of taking the fertility, to make sure that you're fertile, to make sure that you have that you're prepared for that. And then once that happens, and usually that's probably around a 14-day cycle, something, you line that up for about 2 weeks. After that, then you go in for the egg retrieval. And then the egg retrieval process is it's what, minor invasive surgery. So they kind of go right in, and the eggs at that time, like, they can fit on the head of a pin. They're tiny, tiny, tiny. So they prepare, your follicles. That's like the stimulation, and then they retrieve the eggs. Now, if it's going to be like a direct donation, like, they will remove your eggs, and then they immediately inseminate them. They're in a petri dish or something like that, and then they're inseminated, and then I think they wait maybe around 72 hours, and then they insert into the recipient. And God willing, if everything works well, everything kind of comes together, and then they proceed in a normal pregnancy. Now, other options are, if the eggs are to be frozen, sometimes they want to run the eggs through testing just to make sure they're safe or that they're compatible. Or if there are challenges with the sperm, they might not want to do the retrieval immediately. So if that's the case, then for the donor, it's going to be the same cycle. It's going to be the fertilization and the stimulation and then the retrieval. But then the way it's inseminated, that's handled differently, and that's going to be based on the needs of the actual recipients.
Okay. So what are some of the circumstances that would require someone to need an egg or eggs?
The circumstances, I mean, if illness, if there's been any kind of illness in the family, in the bloodline, I guess I would say that would be a reason. Medical, if it's physically unable, there's as many reasons as people, but basically the inability to produce eggs, or if there is also if there's something in that line where they don't want to use their own eggs, or they're not able to produce them, that's typically, how it comes about. And also sometimes it might be a case of they want it to be, the egg to be fertilized outside of the body, and then inseminated in the womb. So there's a number of reasons.
Right. I did read somewhere that some of the reasons, like you said, illness. For example, someone has cancer and have done chemo. Sometimes they may, as a result of chemotherapy,
they may be concerned that the eggs are compromised, their eggs are compromised, something like that.
Right, through a service like that. Mm-hmm. Also through early menopause. Some women may experience very early menopause and consequently may not be able to produce their own eggs and would need egg donors for that. And like you said, there may be other scenarios, medical, it could be a variety of various things, but the conversation about donating an egg is definitely something that it's a really big conversation, as a matter of fact. But again, it's a really big conversation that's held behind closed doors, because a lot of people don't really want to admit that they need the service of an egg donor. I mean, there's a reason why it's a big business, right? And there's a reason why you have sperm donors too. There's a lot of people unable to produce naturally. So,
Absolutely.
so let
No.
me ask you, as a woman of color,
Yeah.
right? I mean, one of the questions that come up right now is like, and we had this conversation last week with one of our guests who was saying she was in a same-sex relationship and looking for sperm. She couldn't find really a lot of options when it came to Black sperm donors. Is there a lot of
Interesting.
options when it comes to Black female egg donors? Are there a lot on the market? Is there a need for women of color to donate eggs? Please tell me.
Well, I would say that once again, based on my experience, there up until recently, it doesn't seem like there was as big a demand. I think that there were a lot of barriers to entry, like so many things, meaning the procedure, it's not inexpensive. You know what I mean? There are hard costs involved. And I think that would probably be a barrier to entry. I think that sometimes in the community of color, there might be other ways, you know what I mean, that you can involve yourself in children's lives that doesn't involve this. When I was going through my process, once again, they sort of found me because they had a family, but everybody else that was in there, all of their other donors, no one, there was no other of color. So excuse me. So sorry about that. There really weren't any, but it was only me, but I was really all they needed because there wasn't a big, huge demand. I feel like recently it's changed once again because I think the conversation has gotten larger, so more people are aware that it is an option, and more people are willing to explore, these other options. So hopefully I think that everyone who wants to have a child should be able to in the way that is best for them. So hopefully, if there's a need, there's somebody there that will accommodate it, that can help that.
Great. So, in your process of providing your eggs, your wonderful DNA to this lovely family, were there any risks?
Oh boy. There's always risks, involved with everything. But I would say that since you're playing, what you're doing is you're adjusting your hormones, so you're manipulating something that kind of has a natural flow and a natural cycle. So there, all sorts of, the challenges to get back to homeostasis, to get back to your natural flow and your natural rhythm. And sometimes that can be a challenge for people. Sometimes that is so you think about all of the repercussions of hormonal imbalance, you think about those things, and you want to keep that in mind, because that's something, getting your cycle back to your normal cycle, stabilizing your hormones so you're not kind of, that up and down. All of those things I think are challenges, and kind of things that kind of fan out beyond that would be the things that I would say. Also, I mean, it's a mild anesthesia, there is a procedure. So, you're mild anesthesia, you're under there. So there's always challenges with that. But I really don't feel like, I think that the weight is primarily, it's emotional, like the journey that you have to go through kind of on that side is the part. You just want to make sure that you are prepared and that you have kind of a strong support group, because it's kind of like being, on the, at the height of ovulation, the most difficult day of your period, or, right before it's going to start. Like, it's kind of like being right there all the time. So you're tender, your body is extra tender. You're kind of going into that like nesting, like mother mode. You're very emotional. Your emotions are, kind of like on a bit of a roller coaster, and and it's not, I think, when you say something, or you say you're going to do something, until you actually do it, you never really know like what it's going to entail, and how it's going to feel. So I would say, go in, with armed with people that can kind of remind you of your why, when it gets to be challenging, or remind you of why you're doing this, or, just kind of lift you up and hold you. Um, I was very fortunate in that the center the fertility center that I worked with, they had a very nurturing environment. So they had a supportive environment. They, kept, you know, um, in touch. They kept actively involved in your physical well-being, your emotional well-being. Are all of your needs being met? And but then I also had at home, like I had my entire family that was around me, reminding me of this is what you're doing, and that this is a truly great thing that you're giving to somebody. So I would say those would be that's kind of the important part, I think.
Okay. Because currently there are a lot of cases where, and I think there's actually some documentaries that make reference to individuals who have been egg donors having compromised reproduction abilities for themselves after the fact. Some of these cases show that these were young women in college who were pursuing this as an opportunity to make money. And like 10 years later, they were compromised. And some actually died, and some are having their own now fertility journey. So 30 years now, 20 years later, since the 90s till now, um, are you saying that you've had no issues whatsoever that have compromised you?
Um, yeah, it's terrible. You don't want anybody to suffer. My suggestion for things like that is always know who you're working with. Do you know what I mean? And ask the hard questions, because yeah, you don't want to end up in a position like that where you are trying to give something to the world and then as a result you're not able to receive. Um, I My health has been fine. So, physically, I think that I would say that my health is pretty idyllic for somebody, my age. I think it's always been. I've never really pursued pregnancy. So I don't know that if I was compromised in any way, but I don't feel like I was. The people that I was around, though, made I think they made sure that we were, that the entire process was as minimally invasive as it could be, so that there wouldn't be any long-term repercussions. I mean, there's a way to, like, I guess, like kind of tiptoe through, a procedure or a situation, or you can go, and leave a scorched earth policy. And I think that the people that I was involved with were very delicate, and treated my body with the utmost respect, and honored it in that way, so that I didn't feel like there was any. Now, once again, I really wasn't trying to become a mom, and I was actively on birth control after that. So I didn't, you know what I mean? So I wasn't looking for it, but I don't feel like I was compromised in any way. But once again, do your research, ask about their other people, so that you can feel comfortable having that information.
And what about the legalities around this action? What was that process like for you?
Oh, I mean, yeah, that's a process. So as I recall, I don't have all of the bullet points in front of me, but some of the things I remembered, first of all, I had to waive all rights to, the ovum, like all rights. It was, there was an adoption contract, and there was also like just a waive of rights, like you can't even don't even consider pursuing this beyond, which especially, which I can understand, but they also gave me the option of, if the child ever wanted to pursue me, if they wanted to find me, because I could be anonymous as well, if that was something that I would be interested in. But you really, you're signing away all of your rights, as far as, the eggs. It's all, you're giving it, and it is theirs. And they, yeah, so you have to be ready for that. Um, when I did it, I had an attorney look over my paperwork as well. just so that I understood it. Obviously, it's legalese. You're signing these big, 15, 20-page documents, and you don't know. So just for my own, I knew why I was doing it. But I think that you want to make sure that you know how you're protected, and what is really happening moving forward. So yeah, but there are definitely legal requirements, just like there are, like I said, emotional requirements. IQ test and mental stability, and a team of therapists that are coming in and talking to you to make sure that you're in a position emotionally to do this, to go this far and then hand it off to somebody else. Because there are cases where it's like, no, I decided that I want, to have the baby. And at that point, they've already invested so much in you. So you want to make sure that that you're able to, and they want to make sure that you're able to, handle it.
How long is the process?
Um, Obviously it depends. For me, it was pretty streamlined because there was somebody who was, kind of almost looking for me. So it's a little bit different, but you align yourself with different fertility centers, and you go through like kind of an initial intake. They'll, basically your stats, your name, your age, your this, your background, and then as, you get closer, if there's somebody that really wants you, really one of their top contenders, um, start doing background checks on you and your family, kind of digging into your medical history, on both sides of the family, and then also kind of into aunts and uncles and cousins. They just kind of fan that out as far as they can. Like all of those things need to be done prior to. So once again, all of my process kind of happened at once because there was someone who wanted me. And so I just, so everything was pretty streamlined, but you can do all of that stuff. And then you're in a database, with your headshot and your stats. And then if somebody says, you know what, those are the one, those are the eggs, it's the ovum that I want, then, you'll begin like the deeper. That's when you go in kind of like to the legal aspects and of course the medical sides of it.
Okay. And then obviously you had your support system to help you through all of that as well. So that was pretty cool. Um, so I have a sheet here that goes into the goes into
Yeah, I'm looking at the donation cost. I think those are very conservative numbers, honestly. I think that there are some ways, depending on the medical insurance that you have. And once again, these are the cost for the recipient family. None of this is for the donor. As a matter of fact, the donor compensation is part of the donation cost. So, but I think this is pretty conservative in terms of the numbers that it takes. I think that if you are fortunate, or if the recipient family is fortunate and they have good insurance, there might be some ways to offset those expenses. But it's definitely not, it's not cheap at all. There are definitely hard costs involved with it. And the thing that you have to, at least I would say to the recipient family, is so all of the egg donation costs, and then, the egg donation, the fertilization, and with any luck, you end up on, the other side of this with, a beautiful baby. So you you start out, 25, 30, 40,000, for the donation procedure, and then you're kind of beginning life with a child. And of course there are costs and expenses with that, as we all know.
right. So you made reference to insurance, and I wanted to know, as a donor, and I know this was back in the 90s,
Yeah.
and I'm sure you're probably still up on some of the benefits for the donors, and I've
Mhm.
done some research also. But does insurance cover some of the services that the donor needs to go through? Does the donor need to have insurance before even attempting to be a part of this overall process?
Well, so for most of the fertility centers at the time and moving forward, there's a medical team that's there caring for you. So you're not really going to your regular physician. You know what I mean? You're not really going to your regular doctor. There's a whole, like a medical center that's dedicated exclusively to this. So whereas, at the beginning, you might need to just go and have a physical with your doctor or something like that, just to prove you're healthy. As soon as you become as soon as you become, a donor for a specific recipient, everything from there on is taken care of. It's part of their, egg donation costs. So your medical care is included in that. Now, as a recipient family, if because there are, the recipient is going through her own physical, all the medications and all the testing and all the blood work and all of that other stuff. Now, if they're fortunate, some of that can be offset by their medical insurance. And that is, it's kind of a question of coding. I think now it seems like the insurance nowadays, they're being a little bit more generous and a little bit more understanding and mitigating some of those costs if you have a good policy. But as the donor, all of your medical, all of your transportation, anything that you need as part of that, that's all taken care of.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know I asked earlier, what is the timeline? Does this take 6 months, a year, 9 months just for the retrieval to be successful or for the retrieval to take place? How long did it take you?
I mean, the thing that's going to, that is kind of the determiner. And you're talking about the actual, all of the prep, all the background work leading up to that takes, that's the research and the medical. But when you actually, for the actual retrieval, like the actual IVF process, typically that's probably around 14 to 21 days. And it's going to, because really, once all of the physical, like you've gotten through all of those hurdles, once you've gotten through that, then you really have to just align your, you have to hormonally align. Your cycles have to line up, because once the cycles line up and you guys are on this together, there's a point where it's the optimal time, and you go in right at that moment and do, and then they do the retrieval. And then once they do the retrieval, once again, another process takes place. Do they immediately, kind of, put it in, with sperm, do they do that? And then, do the insertion into the mother, or are they freezing them? Are they doing? So it depends. But for your part, your active part, when you're going through this, typically, yeah, it's weeks. The entire process can be months, obviously, but that section of it isn't, an exorbitantly long amount of time, but it's taxing. You know what I mean? It's an emotional challenge. It's a physical challenge. So you want to make sure that you're prepared for that.
So fast forward now, we're in 2020 and we're now having this conversation. How
Yeah.
do you feel about making that decision so many years ago when it wasn't a comfortable conversation?
I'm so glad I did it. I am. I think if you're a woman and you don't have children and it's a choice, that you make, I think it's not an easy choice. And so I question myself every day, do I look back? Would I have done anything differently? But no, I feel like I'm glad that I was able to do something for someone who really wanted it. And they were wonderful people, the people that I was involved with. So I can only, wish them all of the best. The fact that I have, theoretically, I know they both came to term. I have 2 children in the world, at least through my eggs. They've got a mom and a dad. I'm glad about that. I mean, I'm incredibly proud. And I think it's one of the greater things that I've done. And my life has been amazing. I think that making that, the donation and the sacrifice, I think it freed me to live the life that I wanted to, because I didn't have to have regrets. I feel like I'd given what I had to give, the best of what I had to give, to someone who was most deserving. And I've traveled all over the world. I'm worked as a travel writer, an events director. I've done phenomenal things. And I really think it's because, I felt like I was free. Like I didn't feel like there, there was anything that was owed. So yeah, it's been a journey, and I'm proud of it. And it's only been recently that I've, had the opportunity to look back on it, because there was really nobody for me to talk to about it before. So when we initially had the conversation, it came up. That's when, I just started kind of going back down memory lane and remembering, what it was and who I was at the time too.
So, what advice would you give to someone right now who may be, one, in need of an egg, or two, considering donating eggs if for their reason they don't want to have children in the future, or they just want to donate eggs, period? What would your advice be?
A couple of things. I do know people who are egg donors who have gone on and had big, beautiful families. So it's definitely not an in. So if you want to be a donor, because you want to give this, just this beautiful energy, you want to put it out into the world, your DNA and, your whole, your history. If you want to put it out there, by all means do. I would say that there is, compensation, but it's a very emotional journey. So I would say go into it because you want that part mainly, you know what I mean? And let, whatever compensation that comes as a result of it, let that be the secondary reason, because it is a journey. And if there are families out there, by all means, especially now, I think it's easier than ever. There's so much more information out there, and there's so many more resources. If this is the way you want to bring someone into the world, by all means, do it. You know what I mean? The world just needs people who want to be here, and who want to just kind of propel the conversation and, evolve, help us evolve. So by all means do that. And God bless you.
Yeah, it's just making me think that the internet was nothing as it is now back in the
Not,
90s.
not at
I
all.
think the internet was just being introduced. I remember being in college and being introduced to the internet, and it was like, whoa, I got an
Absolutely.
email address, AOL, right?
Oh, you remember that little the static on the line?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And everyone was trying to figure it out,
Yeah,
trying to figure out where to get information. Like, I mean, when I was young, I would go to the library for the encyclopedia, but
yeah,
I had now the information is so readily available, and conversations are now more transparent
yes.
than they were back then. So I think people need to be aware. Now, would you say the best age range to do this is in your 30s, in your 20s? Scientifically, what's the best time to do this?
As a donor,
Yes.
typically you're between 25 and 30. Usually by the time it's 30, because they want you at the peak of your fertility, but they also want you to be, kind of like a fully developed adult woman. You know what I mean? It is a little bit riskier, I think, when you're younger, but typically that's the ideal time. I have known some donors that went a little bit, beyond the 30 year mark, because they were incredibly fertile, and they were, and there was demand for their age. And then on the recipient side, um, and everything, that surrounds this particular conversation that we're having, if you're, the younger the better, but what you really want to be in is good physical health. And when you're talking to your doctors, they're going to ask about that. And I guess before you see someone, at whatever age you are, try to get yourself in as best shape as you can, so that you're already, that much ahead. So whatever routines you have to go through, the rigor and, the challenge on your body, you're prepared for them.
Awesome. So I really thank you for sharing this information with us. Do you have any additional words that you'd like to share with anyone?
Um, Thank you for having me, and thank you for, taking me, to a part of my life and part of my journey that I hadn't, had the opportunity to visit in many, many years. So I'm tremendously honored. I want to send out just a message of love and hope and healing to the world right now. There's so there's just a lot going on, and there's just a lot of like just kind of dark energy. And so I think that, the desire to share your eggs and the desire to bring forth people into the universe, it's really one of the most beautiful things you can do. Go forward in love when you do it, and just love and hope and optimism. And yeah, just bless you.
And I want to thank you, Denise, for sharing with us. Um, I know this is a personal story, a personal journey. There's no business to promote. So I will just say to everyone, if you want to know more about stories similar to this, check us out online. Find Support Sundays, find South Florida Fertility Expo, find Yes to Fertility. We're going to be doing more conversations like this where we're sharing personal journeys. And it's 2020. Let's get this popping and let people know that there's resources out there that can help them and encourage them. And you can see yourself if that's a question mark for you. You can see other women of color. And if you're not a woman of color, you just need the information, you can grab the information. It's a universal story, a universal conversation, and there's hope for everyone. So, Denise, thank you so much. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thank you.
All right, go down by the beach and have a good time.
Absolutely. We finally can, right?
I know, we finally can go out and go on the beach. All right, hon, be well. Take care.
Take care.
Bye. And with that being said, everyone, I really want to thank you for joining us today. Like I said, definitely subscribe, share the link, tag a friend, get the words out. We're doing this every Sunday, Support Sundays, talking about fertility journeys. It's a global conversation. Last week we had someone from the UK. Today we've got someone here from Florida. Next week, you never know. It may be Australia, it may be Africa, it may be the Caribbean. We are reaching out to everyone who wants to share to support you on your journey. So be well, take care.